All right, we have our WooCommerce API ready to go. We have the credentials. We have tested one API and Postman. So now we can talk about more about how to test it, other APIs and things like that. Okay, we can just dive right into it. So let's take a look here. This is, so I'm going to just collapse this. So this is the List Customers API. So when we go to the documentation, we go to customers, and first, you get familiar with all the available fields. These are basically fields. When we make the API call, the available fields that show up here. That's what is listed here. What we call is list all customers. So the list all customers is basically no payload. It's a get call that has this URL. We don't have to send any data with that. So that's what we did. We have the authorization. We have in the authorization, we used out 1.0. We put the key, the secret. The header, we didn't add anything. Postman automatically added a bunch of headers for us. The body, there is nothing there. So when we look at the response, let me kind of make this even bigger. When we look at the response, the body is JSON. This is how it ended up coming. It's a list, right? Because we're saying list all items. We're saying get all items. So it's going to give us a list of all the items, which are all the customers. So it's a list. Inside of it is a bunch of JSONs, a little dictionaries right there, right? A bunch of them. So, and each one would have key value pair. We talked about what a JSON is, what it looks like. So this is a very typical JSON. We have the ID, the date created, date modified, the email address. Since this is customers, this is basically all the information about that customer. So when we're testing this, technically we can come up with so many test cases. Like we can come up with one test case for each of these fields if we wanted to. That would be a lot, right? We can come up with multiple test cases for each one of those. But what you're going to do is you're going to actually have to prioritize what is the most important part of this test case, because you might not have time to test everything. Now with AI, you can probably generate tons of tests, automate them really quick, so you can cover everything. But before, what I would do is I would just prioritize what is the most important part of this. Or if I have time, let's say we created this API and I have a month to test it. Well, I'm going to test every single thing about that API. But in reality, though, you would have to pick and choose. So since we're dealing with customers, the email, make sure the email is response, right? In this case, this one is saying list all. So the first thing is we want to say is, did we get all of them? So when we look at this is actually going to be only 10 items. Why is that? That's only because of the documentation that I know. Is going to say so one of the fields we can specify is per page, and default is 10. So if we don't specify per page, it's going to give us 10 of them, even though we might have multiple users. We might have like 1,000 users, but it's going to only get us 10 users. So it's a lot of work to count. But if I was to count those things, if I collapse all of those, that is going to be 10. Actually, I don't have that many customers, and because I just created the website, so it's only actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them available. But normally you would have to say you would have to give it a parameter that says how many to get per page. I can show you that. So we can go into the request, we can go into raw. So when we want to send a JSON parameter, we're going to do raw, and we're going to open close the JSON. We're going to be key and value. So the key is going to be, I need to close this because this is confusing me. This is where I need to be. Per page is the key. So we're going to do per page. Let's say we want to get 2 per page. I'm going to hit send. We got a 200. The first thing we look for is 200. And look, we only got 2 back in the response, right? So the maximum is 100. It doesn't tell you here, but from trial and error, I already know maximum is 100. So if you have 20, like we have 1,000 items or customers, right? You want to make sure this API returns everything. Then you would have to call it 10 times, and you want to add up everything to get to that 100 to make sure it is. But you would test it saying, okay, we just literally tested it right now. Does this per page parameter work? So we set 2 and we got 2, right? That's good to go. We can try one more. We can say edge cases, right? Since by default it was 9, we can do 9. Make the API call and count if there are 9 of them. I don't even have 9, so it's not going to be 9. But that's another test. There's only 8 available. I said 9. Did it fail or not, right? Sometimes there might be some kind of error in there. that it doesn't handle it. If I say per page is 9, but there's only 8, it could blow up. So that could actually be a test case. All right. How many per page? Like, let's look at other parameters. Page numbers. You can specify the page number. We can combine it. I can say per page is 2. Then I can give it page. I can say, give me page number 3 and make the API call. So I'm going to get 2 of them, right? But those will be in page number 3. If you're going to get 2 per page and there is 8 total, so there's going to be 4 pages total. So this got me page number 3, and you would have to do some logic to figure out, is this the right thing or not? But at least you checked that this is working. Then we can look at other things. We can exclude. We have to test if this exclude keyword works. So what this does is ensure results set exclude specific IDs. So if we were to test that, let's say, first let's get everything, right? I'm going to say per page is going to be 20. I'm going to remove this, right? So I'm going to hit send. Since we have a small data set, that makes it easier. So now we got ID number 2, we got ID number 6, we got ID number 8, right? So we can just say exclude number 6, ID 6. So I can say, I can add exclude 6. I can make the call. First, check the status code, 200, good. Also pay attention to how long it takes. You really want to pay attention to that. 1 second for this call for localhost, that's pretty slow. Something is going on. I don't like it, but I'm not going to really care about that. But in the real world, you would care about that. Like, this is localhost. You make this API call to the local server, and it's taking you 1.5 seconds. That's a long time. Let me make the call again. Right, a little bit better. It's less than a second, but still a little bit slower. I expect this to be like 0.2 seconds, 200 milliseconds or so for localhost. But adding this filter probably slows it down. Every time it seems to be a little bit faster. Now it's super slow. So we'll see it. When we add this extra parameter, it's going to do extra work to filter, right? It's running SQL in the backend. It's running query. The service itself is running a query, a database query, MySQL query to get the information. So that part is probably running slow. Anyway, so you have to keep an eye on that. But the main thing right now is we want to make sure 6 is excluded. So we have 2, we have 8, we have 3, right? We have 4, and you keep going like that, and you verify that 6 is excluded. It's going to be a little tough when you're doing it manually, but most of the time you do this kind of things automatically in automation. So in automation, it's easy. You capture what the response looks like without the filter, then you make a request with the filter, and you just compare it. Manually though, you have to be a little clever. How do I know 6 was excluded? Maybe I can just search for it. I can say, look for the number 6. That's going to be too many of them. I can search specifically for ID space 6. It's not there. If I do ID space 3, ID space 3, it finds it. If I do 6, it doesn't find it, so I know 6 is not there. So I can test for that. So you can keep going like this and be like, how do I make sure each thing works and doesn't work? The include should be easy. This is basically saying limit result set to specific ID. So whatever ID I add, that's the one I should get. This one is easy. So I'm going to say include. I'm going to say 6. I want 6. Hit enter. We should only get 1 back, right? Look at it. There's only 1 in the response. And which one did we get? We get 6. So that is a valid test case. So we just looked at few test cases. So you can just look at the payload and make sure the email field is there. It's not empty. You can never create a user without an email. You can check that. You can make sure the timing is right. What kind of customer it is, right? When you're doing get, most of the time you just make sure there is information there. When you're creating create, you worry about those. And in the next video, we'll talk about testing the create endpoint. So now what I did is I basically went to ChatGPT. Well, in this one I did Gemini, and I asked it, hey, the WooCommerce API for the customers, create me some test cases. Right? I told it, give me 10 test cases for the get call, 10 test cases for create customers, and 10 test cases for update customer. And this is what it came up with. So get all customers. So the description will be retrieve all customers. This is the one we did. The steps are send a get request to /customers endpoint. The expected results, all customers or the expected number based on pagination. So pagination is that thing where we're talking about how many per page, which page, right, are returned in the response. So we validated this test case. Right now, we can say pass or fail, and we can say pass, I guess, in a test run. Another test case, get a single customer, retrieve a single customer by ID. So it's using send a get request call /customer/ID. If we look at the documentation, this is what we looked at was list all customers. But retrieve a customer is another endpoint that has /ID, right? We can do that. We kind of did the same thing, but using the customers, but we added a filter in the body. We used this include keyword. But what we can do though is we can duplicate this call, this tab, just like in a browser, you can duplicate it. And let's change that. In the body, we're going to just delete that, right? And here we're just going to slash, and we're going to give it the ID number 6, make the API call. We get a response 200. It's super slow for some reason, and we make sure we get the ID. Now we don't get a list, we get a dictionary, just that one item, because this API is always going to return just one item. All right, so that's what that test case was saying. And customers with fields, basically you're trying to specify a specific field. Let's say customers with pagination, just testing the pagination. Customer with email, trying to search a customer by email, right? So it's going to say make a request with the email parameter. So we're going to make the get customers request, but in the payload, right? In the payload, we're going to say email, and we're going to give it the email address. Let's use this exact same user. We're going to pass in the email address. We're going to say send, and let's see if it returns. It did return. In this case, we want to make sure the email we requested, the customer with the email we requested, is actually what we got. That would be part of our test. All right. So you can come up with a lot of tests like that. You basically, it's just unlimited. It's actually way too many of them. When I talk to ChatGPT or AI, Gemini, I said give me 30 total. So I got 30, but you can just imagine how many there are. Search by first name, search by last name, search by role, search by username, all of that. There is so many things we can do. So that is test cases. So we documented here because AI generated here. Then we're going to put it in our test case management system. And there's a reason I'm doing that. So let's go do that manually right now. Later on, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the WooCommerce API, look at a few more examples of WooCommerce API. Then as an example, we're gonna look at Case.io's API. Case.io, our test case management system, have their own APIs. We're gonna look at that, we're gonna test it, and we're also gonna use it as a real life scenario, how to create test cases. Once you use AI to generate your test cases, you verify them, you go through them, you look at them, everything looks good. Whatever you need to modify, you modify. The steps here, I'm not too happy about some of the steps. I want more details, so I can go back to the AI and say, hey, give me more details on the steps. Once you do that, once you're happy, you want to load all this into your test case management system. One way to do it is upload a CSV, but that gets really complicated because the format they expect has to be exact. Case.io, at least, it's not very friendly when it comes to uploading a CSV. But if you use the APIs, it's so much easier. You're going to use the API, you're going to create a Python script or some other language script, but most likely Python script, that will read this one and actually make an API call and create the APIs, right? I might add a bonus section there just to show you. I know you're not a programmer. I know you don't know Python. Most likely you don't. But I might just show it to you for fun. But we are going to use Postman, and we're actually going to create those test cases. All right, so this is our case.io. I'm already logged in. Let me refresh, make sure I'm not logged out. All right, so right now we're doing a backend. This is an ecom backend. In fact, it happens to be ecom, but we're going to do more in here. The free account will only allow you to have 2 projects. So I'm just going to have one front end, one back end. I'm just going to mix the ecom one, the trivia one, the even case.io. I'm just do it here. So I'm going to create a suite. I'm going to say ecom WooCommerce. I'm just going to WC for WooCommerce, and this is Customers API. All right, I just created a suite. Inside of the suite, I can create a test case. What is my test case? All right, there you go. So the name is going to be this guy. Or I could have just said create case. It created it, but it's doing something. It's doing something really weird. Actually, never had any issues with case before. All right, so let's just do add a case. The title is going to be that. The description is going to be that. The steps is going to be that. There are steps somewhere here. Okay, add a step. We're going to add that. And expected result. We don't really have expected result for the overall test, but we have expected result for each step. So we're just going to put it there. That's pretty much it. Precondition, customer must exit. So for the precondition, I'm going to type it here. That's pretty much it. Category. If you had a paid account, you could create custom fields, and in the custom fields, we could add this category. Here, we don't really have a category. Is it a post or a get? Is it an API? All of that. We don't have that. All of this, we will leave it as is. For the type, we can go to regression or smoke. This is probably smoke. We can do that. We do save. And all of a sudden, we have one test case documented, right? We can come back and keep adding each of those test cases like that. Let's just do one more. Single customer. I'm going to say add. I want not a suite. I want a case. Test case. The title is that. The description is this. The steps. I'm going to add a step. Add the step. Expected condition. Expected results right there. And preconditions right there. Save it. We just created 2 test cases. Later on, we're going to use APIs to create this. I just want to show you an example of a backend test, right? So we looked at the customers API and we came up with a few test cases. I can even add, in fact, I'll do that. I will just save this sheet and put it into your course material. I'll call it something. I'll call it test cases. I'll create a folder for test cases and I'll call it customers API test cases. All right. So that gives you a really good idea of what a test case is, what's API testing. The most important thing about API testing is basically how the API works. Once you have to understand how the API works, then you can test it. It's not common sense like the front end. The front end, you can see it. So if something doesn't work, you would be able to see right away. Plus, we've been using all our lives, especially most of the youngsters since they were born, they've been using front end. So you would know how to use it, how to interact with it. But with API, unless you look at the documentation, unless you look at something like this to know what does create customer do? Is it a post? Okay, what are the parameters? What are the fields? That's not just common sense. You have to look at the documentation. You have to know what it looks like. You have to know what it's supposed to do. And also, we only looked at the get right now. When you do a post, after you create it, maybe you need to go to a database and make sure it's created. Things like that. So let's go to another video and let's talk more about customers API, but we'll do the post one when you actually create customer as opposed to reading customer. But that was a great introduction. It's more than an introduction. We talked about several different types of test cases. Everything you see here, you can test it like, does it has the right information that it's supposed to have? Pretty much in short, that's what we're doing. Right? Let's move on to another video and continue to practice testing.